Our programs offer many languages. Please visit suprememastertv.com/schedule.
Faith alone can give us the light to see that God's will is to be found in our everyday life. To keep ourselves spiritually alive, we must constantly renew our faith. Please continue watching for insights on the spiritual life by the Reverend Thomas Merton, vegetarian.
Hello, shining viewers. I'm Pamela. The optimistic people of the United States Virgin Islands admire your selfless attitude in the name of a better and happier world. The heavens smile on you. Welcome to Contemplating on God, from Thoughts in Solitude by the Reverend Thomas Merton, vegetarian, part 1 of 2, on Words of Wisdom. The Reverend Thomas Merton, an important Catholic mystic and spiritual thinker, was born in 1915 to a New Zealand father and an American mother. The many life situations he encountered in his youth led him to explore religion and spirituality and eventually to devote his life to God by becoming a monk and later a deacon at the Abbey of Gethsemane, a part of the Order of Trappists in Kentucky, USA. He also enjoyed living alone in a hermitage in the monastery's wilderness area. During his monastic life, Thomas Merton developed his writing talent by translating religious texts and writing biographies. He also started penning poetry, as well as books and articles on topics ranging from spirituality to social justice and peace. One of Merton's most famous statements was, "For me, to be a saint means to be myself. Therefore, the problem of sanctity and salvation is in fact the problem of finding out who I am and of discovering my true self." He also said, "We are living in a world that is absolutely transparent and God is shining through it all the time." This is not just a nice story or a fable, it is true. Believing in the equality of all religions, Thomas Merton became deeply interested in Eastern traditions in the later years of his life. He also held lively discourses with His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. Today, the Thomas Merton Center in Kentucky and the International Thomas Merton Society continue to study the life and works of the wise Reverend. Today, we will read a selection from Thomas Merton's book, Thoughts in Solitude. The Reverend offers his deep insights on one's inner spiritual state when in real communion with God. Chapter 9. What does it mean to know and experience my own nothingness? It is not enough to turn away in disgust from my illusions and faults and mistakes, to separate myself from them as if they were not, and as if I were someone other than myself. This kind of self-annihilation is only a worse illusion. It is a pretended humility, which, by saying I am nothing, I mean, in effect, I wish I were not what I am. This can flow from an experience of our deficiencies and of our helplessness, but it does not produce any peace in us. To really know our nothingness we must also love it. And we cannot love it unless we see that it is good. And we cannot see that it is good unless we accept it. A supernatural experience of our contingency is a humility which loves and prizes above all else our state of moral and metaphysical helplessness before God. To love our nothingness in this way, we must repudiate nothing that is our own, nothing that we have, nothing that we are. We must see and admit that it is all ours and that it is all good. Good in its positive entity, since it comes from God. Good in our deficiency, since our helplessness, even our moral misery, our spiritual, attracts to us the mercy of God. To love our nothingness, we must love everything in us that the proud man loves when he loves himself. But we must love it all for exactly the opposite reason. To love our nothingness, we must love ourselves. But the proud man loves himself because he thinks he is worthy of love and respect and veneration for his own sake, because he thinks he must be loved by God and man, because he thinks he is more worthy to be honored and loved and reverenced than all other men. The humble man also loves himself and seeks to be loved and honored, not because love and honor are due to him, but because they are not due to him. He seeks to be loved by the mercy of God. He begs to be loved and helped by the liberality of his fellow men. Knowing that he has nothing, he also knows that he needs everything, and he is not afraid to beg for what he needs and to get it where he can. The proud man loves his own illusion and self-sufficiency. The spiritually poor man loves his very insufficiency. The proud man claims honor for having what no one else has. The humble man begs for a share in what everybody else has received. He too desires to be filled to overflowing with the kindness and mercy of God. Chapter 10. The spiritual life is first of all a life. It is not merely something to be known and studied. It is to be lived. Like all life, it grows sick and dies when it is uprooted from its proper element. Grace is engrafted on our nature, and the whole man is sanctified by the presence and action of the Holy Spirit. The spiritual life is not, therefore, a life entirely uprooted from man's human condition and transplanted into the realm of the angels. We live as spiritual men when we live as men seeking God. If we are to become spiritual, we must remain men. And if there were not evidence of this everywhere in theology, the mystery of the Incarnation itself would be ample proof of it. Why did Christ become man, if not to save men by uniting them mystically with God through his own sacred humanity? Jesus lived the ordinary life of the men of his time in order to sanctify the ordinary lives of men of all time. If we want to be spiritual, then, let us first of all live our lives. Let us not fear the responsibilities and the inevitable distractions of the work appointed for us by the will of God. Let us embrace reality and thus find ourselves immersed in the life-giving will and wisdom of God which surrounds us everywhere. First, let us be sure that we know what we are doing. Faith alone can give us the light to see that God's will is to be found in our everyday life. Without this light, we cannot see to make the right decisions. Without this certitude, we cannot have supernatural confidence and peace. We stumble and fall constantly, even when we are most enlightened. But when we are in true spiritual darkness, we do not even know that we have fallen. To keep ourselves spiritually alive, we must constantly renew our faith. We are like pilots of fog-bound steamers, peering into the gloom in front of us, listening for the sounds of other ships, and we can only reach our harbor if we keep alert. The spiritual life is, then, first of all, a matter of keeping awake. We must not lose our sensitivity to spiritual inspirations. We must always be able to respond to the slightest warnings that speak, as though by a hidden instinct in the depth of the soul that is spiritually alive. Meditation is one of the ways in which the spiritual man keeps himself awake. It is not really a paradox that it is precisely in meditation that most aspirants for religious perfection grow dull and fall asleep. Meditative prayer is a stern discipline, and one which cannot be learned by violence. It requires unending courage and perseverance, and those who are not willing to work at it patiently will finally end in compromise. Here, as elsewhere, compromise is only another name for failure. To meditate is to think. And yet, successful meditation is much more than reasoning or thinking. It is much more than affections, much more than a series of prepared acts which one goes through. In meditative prayer, one thinks and speaks not only with his mind and lips, but in a certain sense with his whole being. Prayer is then not just a formula of words or a series of desires springing up in the heart. It is the orientation of our whole body, mind, and spirit to God in silence, attention, and adoration. All good meditative prayer is a conversion of our entire self to God. One cannot then enter into meditation in this sense without a kind of inner upheaval. By upheaval, I do not mean a disturbance, but a breaking out of routine, a liberation of the heart from the cares and preoccupations of one's daily business. The reason why so few people apply themselves seriously to mental prayer is precisely that this inner upheaval is necessary, and they are usually incapable of the effort required to make it. It may be that they lack generosity, and it may also be that they lack direction and experience, and go about it the wrong way. They disturb themselves. They throw themselves into agitation by the violent efforts they make to get recollected, and finally they end in hopelessness. They compromise in the end by a series of frustrated routines which help them to pass the time, or else they relax into a state of semi-coma which they hope can be justified by the name of contemplation. Every spiritual director knows that it is a difficult and subtle matter to determine just what is the borderline between interior idleness and the faint, unperceived beginnings of passive contemplation. But in practice, at the present time, there has been quite enough said about passive contemplation to give lazy people a chance to claim the privilege of praying by doing nothing. There is no such thing as a prayer in which nothing is done or nothing happens, although there may well be a prayer in which nothing is perceived or felt or thought. All real interior prayer, no matter how simple it may be, requires the conversion of our whole self to God, and until this has been achieved, either actively by our own efforts or passively by the action of the Holy Spirit, we do not enter into contemplation, and we cannot safely relax our efforts to establish contact with God. For more information about Thomas Merton, please visit merton.org. Generous viewers, we thank you for your kind presence for today's Words of Wisdom. Please join us again tomorrow for part 2 of this program. Coming up next is The Culture of Laws, right after Noteworthy News. Please stay tuned to Supreme Master Television for more uplifting programming. May you find pure contentment and awakening in your daily communion with God.
Our programs offer many languages. Please visit suprememastertv.com/schedule and suprememastertv.com/WOW.
Nos programmes offrent plusieurs langues. Veuillez visiter suprememastertv.com/schedule et suprememastertv.com/WOW.
Nuestros programas ofrecen varios idiomas. Visiten suprememastertv.com/schedule y suprememastertv.com/WOW.
Chương trình của chúng tôi cung ứng nhiều ngôn ngữ. Xin xem suprememastertv.com/schedule và suprememastertv.com/WOW.